All right, ready to dive into a classic. We're tackling How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, this book's like legendary, right? It's helped millions, and it's crazy how relevant it still is today.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't want to improve their relationships and have more influence?
And Carnegie gives you a practical guide to do just that.
Totally.
Right.
The book's broken down into these 4 parts. Handling people, making them like you, winning them to your way of thinking, and becoming a leader.
And it's not just theory. He gives you real stories and even exercises to actually put these ideas into practice.
Okay, let's jump into part 1. Fundamental techniques in handling people. First up, this one seems a bit counterintuitive. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Yeah, it's like we're so used to pointing out what's wrong. But Carnegie argues that it's actually super counterproductive.
So, even if we're right, criticism just backfires.
Think about it. Even a notorious criminal like Two Gun Crowley, when he was cornered by the police, he wrote this letter where he claimed he was innocent.
Wow, even then.
Even then, we're all wired to protect our egos, and criticism, it just triggers that defense mechanism.
So it's like, no matter who you are, criticism makes you defensive, not receptive. Makes sense.
John Wanamaker, the department store guy, had a great point about this. He said he had enough trouble overcoming his own limitations without scolding other people for theirs.
It's like, focus on yourself first, right? We all have room for improvement.
Exactly. So instead of criticizing, what does Carnegie suggest?
He says, give honest and sincere appreciation. Shift that focus.
Yeah, it's about recognizing what's right instead of dwelling on what's wrong. Yeah. Think about Lincoln, right? He once wrote this really harsh letter to an army officer.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. He was furious.
But before sending it, he realized how destructive it would be, so he chose appreciation over conflict.
Powerful choice. It reminds me of that story about Bob Hoover, the famous test pilot.
Oh, yeah. What?
So a mechanic accidentally switched the fuel lines on his plane. Could have been a disaster. But Hoover, he didn't get angry or blame anyone.
Wow. What did he do?
He found out the mechanic was under a ton of pressure from his supervisor, and Hoover actually showed him empathy. He even requested that same mechanic help him inspect the plane in the future.
That's amazing. He turned a near disaster into a connection.
Okay, this next principle is intriguing. Arouse in the other person an eager want.
This gets to the core of influence. It's not about forcing someone. It's about understanding what they desire.
So figuring out what makes them tick, and then connecting your request to that.
Yeah. Think about Freud and Dewey. They both talked about our deep human need for importance, for achievement. We all crave that, you know?
It's like whether it's getting a blue ribbon or a simple thank you, we want to feel valued.
Exactly. Remember that story about Emerson and the calf?
Wait, remind me.
So Emerson and his son were trying to get a calf into the barn. They were pushing and pulling, but the calf wouldn't budge. Then a housemaid came along, and she figured out that the calf wanted to suck on her finger.
So she just gently led the calf in.
Yep. She understood what the calf wanted and used that to guide it.
That's clever. And this principle applies to so many things. Think about parents who use this all the time.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard stories of parents getting kids to eat vegetables by telling them it'll give them superpowers, or to clean their room by making it a game.
It's about making them want to do it, not forcing them.
Exactly. It's understanding their motivations and working with them, not against them.
Okay, so we've got don't criticize, give appreciation, and arouse an eager want.
3 powerful principles that really shift how we approach interactions, right?
Instead of reacting negatively or demanding things, we focus on understanding and connecting with the other person.
It's a whole new mindset.
Okay, I'm ready for part 2, where Carnegie reveals 6 ways to make people like you.
These are some simple yet powerful techniques.
I'm ready. Let's hear them.
All right, let's dive into those 6 ways to make people like you. The first one is all about being present. Become genuinely interested in other people.
Yeah, I think in our busy world, it's so easy to get caught up in our own heads, But this principle is about really focusing on the other person.
It's like recognizing the value in everyone, regardless of their position or their status.
It makes me think of President Coolidge. Carnegie tells this story about how Coolidge made an effort to connect with everyone, even the gardeners at the White House.
It's about seeing the human being, not just the job title.
Exactly. And it's not just about being polite, it's about genuine interest. Remember Edward Sykes, the sales rep?
Oh, yeah, the one who kept a client by building relationships with everyone at the drugstore, not just the owner.
He got it. He understood that every interaction matters.
And think about Carnegie himself. He was able to get all these famous authors to speak at his classes just by expressing sincere admiration for their work.
It's like he tapped into their desire for recognition and created a win-win situation.
It all starts with that genuine interest. Okay, get ready for this one. It's a classic. Smile.
Simple but powerful, right?
Yeah. I mean, a smile can instantly change the energy of any interaction. It makes people feel welcome and at ease.
Carnegie talks about this broker, Bill, who was known for being kind of a grumpy guy. He decided to try smiling more, and it totally transformed his life. People responded better to him, his business improved, even his relationships at home got better.
It's amazing how much of a difference a simple smile can make.
Okay, this next one, I admit, I struggle with this one. Remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language.
I think it's about recognizing the power of personalization. Our names are so closely tied to our identity. When someone remembers our name, it makes us feel seen and valued.
Yeah, I get that. It's like that story of the man who got so offended when his name was misspelled. It shows you how much it matters.
It's a small thing, but it makes a big difference.
Think about Jim Farley. He was a political strategist, and he was known for remembering thousands of people's names.
Yeah.
Key to his success.
It creates an instant connection, right?
Right. Yeah, like you immediately feel like, oh, this person actually cares about me.
It's about making that effort to remember and use people's names. It shows respect.
Okay, this one is crucial for any kind of meaningful conversation. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves.
Yeah, we're often so focused on getting our own point across that we forget to actually listen. But when you really listen to someone, it creates a strong connection.
It's about making them the center of attention. There's that story about Carnegie being at a dinner party and barely saying a word, but afterward, people were praising him for being a fascinating conversationalist.
Just because he was a good listener.
Exactly. He was fully present and engaged.
He also quotes Charles W. Eliot, who said that the secret to good communication is giving exclusive attention to the person who's speaking.
It's not about waiting for your turn to talk. It's about really hearing and understanding what the other person is saying.
Absolutely. And when you do that, you create a space for the other person to feel heard and understood.
This next one resonates with me. Talk in terms of the other person's interests.
It's about finding common ground and connecting through shared passions.
Instead of pushing your own agenda, you're trying to see the world from their perspective.
Right. Think about Edward Chalif. He was trying to get funding for the Boy Scouts, and he managed to secure a huge donation by talking to this executive about his love for boats.
He connected his request to the executive's interests. Brilliant.
And what about that bread salesman who finally landed a big order after 4 years by talking to the customer about his stamp collection? He realized it wasn't about the bread, it was about building a relationship.
It's like sometimes you got to stop focusing on the sale and just connect on a human level.
Exactly. And the last one in this section is all about making people feel good. Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
I think we all crave that feeling of being valued and appreciated.
It's a deep human need, and when someone recognizes our worth, it creates a strong bond.
Think about Hall Caine. He became a successful author, but it all started because this famous poet recognized his talent and made him feel important.
It gave him the confidence to keep going.
Right. And it's not just about big gestures. Sometimes it's the small things that matter. Like that story about the shy student, Chris, who really struggled in school until his teacher, Mr. Rowland, made him feel capable.
It's about acknowledging the good in others and expressing it sincerely.
So we've got these 6 ways to make people like you. Become genuinely interested, smile, remember names, be a good listener, talk about their interests, and make them feel important.
It's not about manipulation. It's about building genuine connections based on respect and understanding.
And it sets the stage for the next level, right?
Yeah, we're moving into the art of persuasion. How to win people to your way of thinking without creating resentment.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into part 3. All right, so we've learned how to handle people, how to make them like us, and even how to win them over to our way of thinking.
Yeah, we're building up to something big here. Now we're going to see how all of this applies to leadership.
Okay, so it's about more than just being in charge, right?
Absolutely. This last part of the book is all about be a leader, how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. And it starts with a really important principle. If you must find fault, this is the way to begin.
So it's acknowledging that sometimes as leaders, we do have to point out where someone's going wrong.
We do. But the key is how we do it. And Carnegie suggests starting with praise. Acknowledge their positive qualities, their accomplishments. It creates a much more receptive environment for feedback.
I get it. It's like if a friend gives you advice, you're more likely to listen if they start by saying something nice.
Exactly. It softens the blow and shows respect. Think about Calvin Coolidge. Even he, known for being a man of few words, would compliment his secretary's appearance before addressing a minor issue.
Wow, even Coolidge. So it's about setting a positive tone, making the person feel valued before you point out areas for improvement.
Exactly. It's about respect.
And it makes me think about how Lincoln handled General Hooker during the Civil War. Hooker had made some pretty big mistakes.
Yeah, he had.
But Lincoln, in his letter to Hooker, started by praising his ambition, his past successes. Only then did he address his shortcomings.
It's a great example of leading with empathy. Lincoln knew that crushing Hooker's spirit wouldn't help anyone.
Right. It makes me think about those bosses who just focus on what you did wrong, never on what you're doing right.
It's so demoralizing, and that's why the next principle is so important. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly.
So instead of directly saying, you messed up, you find a more subtle way to guide them. But can that really be effective?
Well, Carnegie tells this story about a factory manager who was dealing with a subcontractor delivering subpar work. Instead of directly criticizing him, he kind of steered the conversation towards the subcontractor's family history, his pride in his factory.
So he appealed to his ego, subtly highlighted the gap between his aspirations and his current performance.
Exactly. By the end of the visit, the subcontractor was willingly agreeing to make changes. It's about leading with questions, not commands.
It sounds like a much more collaborative approach to problem solving.
Definitely. And this next principle is all about setting that tone for a culture of learning and growth. Talk about your own mistakes before criticizing the other person.
Leading by example.
Exactly. It shows humility. Think about it. We often forget that our leaders are human, too. They make mistakes just like everyone else.
Admitting those mistakes makes you more relatable, right?
It creates a safer space for others to admit their own shortcomings. Remember that story Carnegie tells about his niece, Josephine?
She was working as his secretary, right?
Yep. And he realized that criticizing her directly for being inexperienced wouldn't be helpful. So he talked about his own past mistakes, shared his experiences with her.
He created a connection through vulnerability.
Yeah, and it shifted the dynamic from this boss-employee relationship to more of a mentor-mentee.
That's cool. It reminds me of something Brené Brown says about vulnerability being the birthplace of courage and creativity.
Love that. Okay, so next up. Ask questions instead of giving direct orders.
Empowering people to find solutions instead of just telling them what to do.
Think about this. There was a plant manager facing this impossible deadline. Instead of ordering his team to just work harder, he asked for their input. How can we meet this deadline?
He trusted their expertise.
Yeah, he did. And the team, feeling empowered and engaged, they came up with creative solutions and they delivered the order on time.
Wow, so it's a win-win for everyone. The team feels valued and the manager gets the results he needs.
Exactly. And even when you need to correct someone's behavior, it's important to remember this next principle. Let the other person save face.
It's about remembering everyone has an ego, right?
Yeah, even when they've messed up. Public humiliation never helps.
I've definitely had bosses who didn't get that memo.
Carnegie gives that example of the hotel manager who always fired employees privately, ensuring they left with their dignity intact.
So it's about recognizing their humanity, even when they've made a mistake.
And that leads us to a principle that's essential for growth. Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise.
Okay, so celebrate those small wins.
It's about acknowledging effort, not just results. Sometimes a simple good job can go a long way.
Yeah, it's amazing how far a little bit of encouragement can go. Remember that story about the charwoman?
The one who went above and beyond after just getting a little note of appreciation.
Yeah, recognition is a powerful motivator. And when you combine that recognition with high expectations, you tap into another great principle. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to.
It's like that self-fulfilling prophecy thing. If you believe in someone and you tell them they're capable of great things, they're more likely to achieve them.
Makes me think about that maid who was told she had hidden treasures within herself.
And she blossomed into this confident, capable person. It's about seeing potential in others and helping them to see it in themselves.
Okay, this next principle feels especially relevant these days. Make the fault seem easy to correct.
Yeah, when something feels overwhelming, we're much more likely to just give up, right?
Totally. But if you break things down into smaller steps, it feels more manageable.
Carnegie talks about this father who helped his son get better at math by turning it into a game. He made learning fun and achievable.
So it's about emphasizing what's possible, not what's wrong.
Exactly. Okay, and now for the final principle, the one that brings it all together. Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest.
So this is about inspiring people to actually want to do what you're suggesting.
Think about it. The most effective leaders are the ones who can get people to willingly embrace their vision, contribute their best efforts.
Right. It's not about forcing them. It's about inspiring them.
And that comes down to understanding and respecting the other person's needs and motivations. Think about Colonel House and William Jennings Bryan.
Remind me what happened.
So, Colonel House needed Bryan to stay in Washington, but Bryan wanted to go to Europe. House subtly convinced him to stay by implying that he was too important to be sent away.
He appealed to his ego.
Exactly. He made Bryan feel good about staying in Washington, even though it was really serving House's purpose.
It's brilliant.
It all goes back to that core human desire to feel important and appreciated that's woven throughout this whole book.
From giving sincere appreciation to making people feel like their ideas matter, it's about recognizing that everyone has something valuable to offer.
Exactly.
So we've covered all the key principles of how to win friends and influence people, from handling people to becoming a leader.
It's a roadmap for better relationships, for becoming more persuasive, for having a positive impact on the world.
It's amazing how these principles, written almost a century ago, are still so relevant today.
They tap into something fundamental about human nature, our desire for connection, for meaning.
And they're principles that anyone can apply. As you go about your day, think about how you might use these ideas.
Could you be more mindful about giving sincere appreciation? Could you make a bigger effort to understand another person's perspective even when you disagree?
And just imagine a world where everyone genuinely practiced these principles. What a different world it would be.
A lot to think about.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep connecting.